But we begin tonight with that breaking news out of Georgia. The good news for Fani Willis, she's allowed to continue prosecuting the Trump election interference case in Georgia. The bad news, her ex-boyfriend and special prosecutor Nathan Wade will not. He officially resigned from the case about an hour ago. Now, the good news for Donald Trump, a judge ruled there is, quote, an odor of mendacity about the state's case, thanks to the romantic relationship between Willis and Wade and their subsequent behavior after it was revealed. The case will likely now be delayed. But the bad news for Trump is that the prosecution has certainly been wounded, but has not been crippled. The judge declined to outright disqualify Willis in his decision this morning and said there was no clear evidence of an actual conflict of interest. For now, the case can move forward. Joining us now are former federal prosecutors David Weinstein and John O'Connor. Also joining us is Georgia State University College of Law professor Clark Cunningham. Great to have all three of you with us. Clark, I'd like to start with you. You've been very critical of Fani Willis's behavior thus far. While the judge did not remove Willis from the case, he did sharply criticize her, saying she showed, quote, a tremendous lapse in judgment by dating Mr. Wade, who she hired. And critics say this has really cast a pall over her professionalism and integrity.
Well, let's remember what's at stake here. And the real question is, when will the case against Donald Trump in Georgia go to trial? And that still is up in the air, I would say, despite Judge McAfee's decision this morning. And the Georgia case is very important for the nation because it would be the only trial based on the election interference allegations that would be televised. And it actually could begin as early as this spring. The problem with the situation is even though Judge McAfee's ruling does allow the district attorney to stay on the case for now, Trump's lawyers has indicated that he's going to appeal. And depending on what happens with the appeal process, everything still could be delayed, perhaps even past the election.
Yeah, we'll get to that appeal and possible delay process in a second. John, the pause on the case for now has been lifted, but after weeks of embarrassing hearings and tawdry headlines, Willis's reputation is battered. Does Wade's resignation really fix any of this?
I don't think it does, Elizabeth, and I think also, while Judge McAfee did not order the case removed to another venue, I think he set up the question as to whether or not, when trial approaches, is the publicity still lingering such that Trump couldn't get a fair trial in Fulton County. And if I were Trump, that would be something that I would go after strongly with polling, with canvassing of potential jurors to try to make that case. Because there is, as Judge McAfee says, there is the order there.
Yeah,
now, he went as far as he could.
But, John, explain why the bad publicity and tawdry headlines around Willis and Wade would impact Trump's ability to get a fair trial.
Well, remember that she has stated that all these charges against her are based on racism. And she's injected the race card into this thing. And I think it's one reason Judge McAfee has sort of stayed clear of that. And he did the minimum here. He did not do the maximum he could have done. But if I were Trump, I would say the pretrial publicity on this is just too much to get a fair trial in Fulton County. And so that's the measure. I think there have been some strong racial overtones here, including the idea that black people have cash and this is unfair to black people to be charging me with this. I think she made a speech at a church. So if I were Trump, I would jump all over that. And the judge seemed to indicate that maybe when the time came that would be a valid motion.
David, I want to get your reaction to what Clark was just saying about the fact that Trump and his co-defendants could appeal this ruling further, and that would further delay this case. What are the chances this trial will actually happen before the election?
I think they're very slim, Elizabeth. I mean, look, the problem with the appeal is if you read the opinion, it's going to be whether or not he abused his discretion, and then whether or not he's going to give him a stay from the entry of it to put this case on hold. I think that he did a fair job of making his ruling one that was right down the middle of the road, right based on the facts. There's not much there for them to hang their appeal on. They're going to try, and that's going to delay it a little bit. But ultimately, I'm not sure that it goes up before the case gets to move forward. But having said that, you've got a new trial team that needs to be assembled. Fani Willis needs to step into the background and remove herself from the courtroom. And then you're going to have to address the problem that both of the other people were just talking about, and that is, how is this case going to move forward, get through jury selection, and find jurors who can sit on this trial all before November?
Thanks so much for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.